Yes. Hey everybody, John the Editor here, obviously. And I have a couple of things to talk about. Really, I have two topics. They're slightly related, but really this should be two videos, but I'm too lazy to do two, so I'm just going to do one video. The first is, we have an expression, a fairly common expression that we keep hearing, specifically in relation to a lot of the activities of the political left right now, and the political extreme left, and that is, those who forget their history are doomed to repeat it. Now, what this expression means is not that if you forget history, you're going to repeat like something good, like the Industrial Revolution, which raised everybody's standards of living and, you know, reduced infant mortality and childbirth and everything like that. No, when you hear those who forget their history are doomed to repeat it, you're talking about historical human catastrophes like the Holocaust, or the Armenian genocide, or the Holodomor, or the Chinese Great Leap Forward, which was a vast anti-human, murderous, and history-erasing event. So yeah, that's what that means. When you hear those who forget their history are doomed to repeat it, it means the catastrophe, like the real, you know, earth-shattering catastrophes, Holodomor, Armenian genocide, Great Leap Forward, and so on. Holocaust is also in that category. But a related idea that nobody really seems to talk about is not forgetting history, but purposefully erasing it. And we have now a popular sport emerging, which might be a demonstration sport in the next Olympics, and that is pulling down statues and erasing history books and silencing, you know, professionals. And this falls broadly under the category of not forgetting history, but specifically and actively erasing history. If you exhibit the desire to erase history by, say, pulling down statues or, you know, calling violent rioters peaceful protesters, you're erasing history. You're fabricating the history of the recent history of the world. You're falsifying the facts, which falls under the category of erasing history. It's not that you're doomed to repeat the catastrophes of history, it's that you want to repeat the catastrophes of history. You want to reenact or recreate something on the scale of the Armenian genocide or the Great Leap Forward, that vast, murderous, anti-human transition to the most murderous and anti-human and destructive political philosophy ever created by the mind of a human being, Marxism, or Maoism, which is a flavor of Marxism. So yeah, let's begin to realize that rather than forgetting history, actively erasing history isn't just you're doomed to repeat history, is you want to repeat it, and I mean the catastrophes, the genocides, the great human catastrophes. If you engage in the pulling down of statues or the falsifying of the news as a newscaster, you are attempting to facilitate and bring about another of these great human catastrophes, a genocide or some large-scale human event that will be remembered as one of the great catastrophes of the human race, of which there are many examples in the 20th century, mostly relating to the attempt at implementing communism. That's the first thing I wanted to talk about. The second thing, and this is, you know, like its own video, is a particularly egregious and forbidden word that nobody is allowed to say. And I can't say this word on YouTube. It'll basically cost me my channel. That's how forbidden this word is. I can't even mention this word in the sense of discussing it intellectually, never mind using it as an offensive weapon, which is how it's normally used. Now, I wrote this word down on a piece of paper, and then I took black electrical tape and I masked most of it out so that you don't get to see it. But you know what word I mean, right? Or did I? Did I write the whole word down, or did I just write the letter N and then suggest that I wrote it down by putting two pieces of black electrical tape? We may never know the answer to that. And when I finish recording this, I'm going to destroy the evidence so that the thought police, when they burst my door in, don't have legal grounds to send me to the re-education gulag, which I'm sure they would like to do. But if somebody in your life uses this word, it's quite likely that you will give them at the very least the stink eye. You will correct them. You will maybe chastise them. You might even throw them out of your social circle. Listen, buddy, if you are comfortable using that word, you are not really welcome in my life anymore. And I can understand that. I think that's a reasonable response, because that word in its modern usage really doesn't have any application except the degradation of other people based on their group affiliation, the group association. Notwithstanding that, people like white university student Black Lives Matter protesters, white Black Lives Matter protesters, seem to be very fond of using this word to insult, say, black police officers or black civilians who are not fully on board with the Black Lives Matter Marxism burn the whole city down movement. Notwithstanding that the white pro-black Black Lives Matter violent arsonist protesters, who are white, by the way, like to use this to describe black people who don't support BLM. That's a little bit complicated and tangled for me to unravel, but I certainly understand the desire to not allow that word to be in popular common usage, because its purpose is clearly to demean and degrade people. So I've talked about that at length. I've rambled on and on. To give the example, in my personal life, I have a number of words that I not only don't use, but I don't allow other people to use. And it's not like I police people's behavior. It's not like I take control of them. I simply enact that if they use certain pieces of terminology, they are not part of my world anymore. And that includes employers. And one of them is mansplaining. Now, this is a very popular term, and it seems to be used with somewhat wild abandon by people of a particular political ideology. Now, the way that it's explained, the word mansplaining, is that you're engaging in condescending explanation of something to another person, and the condescension is because they are of a particular sex that you're not of, right? So if you're male and you're explaining something in a condescending way towards a woman, that's mansplaining. That's the popular mainstream definition of that word, but that's actually a lie. That explanation is false. That's a lie. If somebody gives you that explanation, they're either misinformed, unlikely, or they're lying to you, much more likely. The actual definition of the word mansplaining is, it's a word which has the purpose of stating, as if it is fact, that the person being accused of mansplaining is beneath, at a spiritual level, beneath the person using the word mansplaining, beneath them intellectually, beneath them in terms of ethical development. So if you say you're mansplaining, or stop mansplaining, or did you just mansplain? What you're saying is, I am spiritually, ethically, and intellectually and educationally above you, but particularly spiritually. I'm at a higher moral plane, and you don't dare speak to me unless I ask you. Your available responses are, yes ma'am, no ma'am, I agree, I'll do that right away. You are a subordinate, subhuman, subethical, suboptimal piece of human filth that really we're going to erase you from the planet existence. We're going to erase your whole group. So don't you dare think for a millisecond that you have the right to have an opinion, to speak, to know things. You must always remember that you're beneath me. You're like when the person's saying mansplaining, right? That's what it means. It's a word that is calculated and designed to demean, degrade, and dehumanize the other person who gets that word used on them. It's in the same category as the word suggested here, which might just be the letter N, but there might be a word under there. You never know. That's what the word mansplaining is. And nobody in my life uses it. Or at least, if they do use it, they use it once and then they're not in my life anymore. This is how I keep hateful, disgusting, bigoted, and vile, vicious, cruel, evil people out of my life. And really, there's no like excusing this. It's not like, oh, I didn't know. No. It's not like, because the N word, the word that nobody's allowed to say, that has a history. And if you go far enough back in time, the N word didn't have its racial demeaning context that it has now. I mean, it was, it became more and more of a slander over many decades. it's now clearly a slander, but it evolved from a word that was just common and didn't necessarily have that extreme degrading and demeaning character to it. Unlike the word mansplaining, which was coined specifically and singularly to be a term of demeaning and degrading utility, to demean and degrade another person, which is why nobody in my life uses it, and if they do use it, they use it once and they're gone. Now, I'm not going to go exhaustively through the great list of all these terms, but there's a bunch of other ones, and you can guess what they are. I'm going to give you just a few examples so you have the flavor of it. Manspreading, that's another one. That's a term designed to demean and degrade, and nobody in my life uses it. Like, I never get to hear that word except from disgusting people online. Toxic masculinity, that's a term, supposedly, if you ask somebody, the term is to describe the characteristics of men that are specifically negative. But that's a lie. That explanation is a lie. The phrase toxic masculinity actually means masculinity is toxic. It's designed to equate toxicity with masculinity, which is grotesque, foul, despicable, and not to be tolerated. Like, nobody uses that term in my life. Don't use that word. You're gone. And nobody needs to be told this. Like, no rational thinking adult needs to be told this. This is like everybody knows this. So anybody who does this, use this word, is using it with a specific and malevolent, malicious intent. So I would suggest just these are things for you to consider. Similarly, cisgender. Now, this is a tricky one. This is a word that's becoming commonly accepted, but cisgender is a word designed to marginalize and degrade people of the most common sexuality, that your physicality and your sexual identity are in alignment. That's what the word means. But it doesn't just mean that. It means if you are in that category, you are to be demeaned and degraded. You are to be marginalized. Your opinion is to be silenced. You are to shut up. You should go to the back of the line. Your human rights are to be downgraded. You are a piece of filth and you don't understand. You don't possess empathy. You're vicious. Perhaps you're a white supremacist, and so on and so forth. It's the assignment of and corruption on a person based on their sexual identity, which, that's like the principal thing that you don't do. When we look at the gay rights movement or the LGBT rights movement over the past, 5 decades, 6 decades, that movement, maybe even centuries, that's the thing that they have argued is unacceptable, and now they've coined a term specifically to do that to you, should you fall in that category, or even if you should politically disagree with them and you're not in that category, but they're going to put you in that category because you're now less than human. That's a term nobody uses in my presence, and if they do, they're gone. The N-word, not acceptable. And yet, at the present, all these other words which are actually synonyms for the N-word are acceptable. The only difference is which groups do you get to demean and degrade. And I would suggest that you begin treating all of these words as if they are the same. Thanks very much for watching, and as always, have a lovely, lovely day.